So I want to begin with a question this morning. How many communities are you a part of? If you're like me, you belong to several, to a greater or lesser degree. I belong to a worldwide community of Vision Quest guides for over 20 years. We're far-flung, but it's an important community to me. There's the community of the place I now live, Chimayo. My wife and I are slowly learning to be a part of that community. I'm also a member of the Unitarian Universalist community, specifically the congregations of Santa Fe and Taos, which are part of the larger community of Unitarian Universalist congregations. So perhaps you're also part of a knitting circle or a gardening club. Maybe you're involved in a political party, an environmental group, a food kitchen, any number of things to be involved in your community. We belong to communities within communities, circles nested within circles. Some of those are communities of place, some are communities of interest. Some of these communities overlap. Some of them have no knowledge of each other whatsoever at all. You might be the only one. But we live in a world where such things are possible, where we can choose where to live, who to associate with. That's a pretty amazing thing. And all of these communities have their own cultures, their own rules and traditions, expectations. Even those that share common roots have their own individual flavor. UU Taos and UU Santa Fe, for example, are distinct and beautiful expressions of our liberal religious values. So what does it mean to be a liberal religion? Well, a lot of folks think that it has to do with progressive left politics and social concerns, in contrast to the religious right. And there is some truth in that, but that's not it. Liberal comes from the Latin liber. The word means free. Liberal religion is free religion. Free from creeds and unquestioned belief in scriptures or ideologies. Free from orthodoxies. Free from fundamentalist thinking. Free from authoritarian priesthoods and clerics. Freedom to seek the truth as individuals. Freedom to live and work by our own choices. Freedom to associate with those we choose to associate with. Freedom to love who we please. And that freedom was born of the Enlightenment and the social and political order that arose from it. That order we now call classical liberalism. It's a political and moral philosophy based on the rights of the individual, liberty, consent of the governed, equality before the law. And in general, liberalism supports private property, market economies, individual rights, including civil rights and human rights, democracy, secularism, the rule of law, economic and political freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of press, and freedom of religion. And these ideas are the foundation of what becomes humanism. The idea that the human, rather than divine or supernatural powers, should guide our affairs. We believe in the value and goodness of human beings. We emphasize common human needs, and we seek reasonable and inclusive ways of solving human problems. And as I pointed out before, believing in humans takes a lot more faith than believing in unseen deity. a lot of faith. But those are our roots, and they're deep ones. Our religious and political ancestors had had enough of hereditary privilege, state religions, the divine right of kings, among other things. They sought freedom of belief and association in a time when these things were forbidden and brutally oppressed. And their struggle for freedom, for those freedoms, took generations. Like all struggles, there were setbacks. Access to those freedoms, and the rights and the responsibilities that go with them has slowly expanded over the generations. Continues to expand. Liberalism is not perfect. It has its failings and weaknesses. It can be abused like all systems. But it's taken us far, and I believe that it can take us farther. But why liberal religion? Even if we could agree on a definition of what constitutes a religion, that's pretty up in the air. Why incorporate liberalism into it? So we have to look back to history for some answers. And we look to the Protestant Reformation, which was a reaction to what Joseph LeConte calls the sins of Christendom, the denigration of individual conscience, the criminalization of dissent, the corrosive and compromised relationship of church and state, the humanism of clerical leadership, and the deeply rooted anti-Semitism. Most important of all, the Catholic Church and the monarchies failed to uphold the freedom and dignity of every human soul. And the Protestant project was essentially the creation of a more just society based on the life and teachings of Jesus. Our faith has evolved from that. It's grounded in that heritage and the pursuit of those ideals. The ideal of human equality and human freedom based on the proposition that every person bears the image of God. The ideal that the rights of conscience are sacred and cannot be coerced by church or state. The ideal that impartial justice, the golden rule, must be the cornerstone of any free and democratic society. We still seek the full implementation of those ideals, even if we no longer necessarily hold to the original beliefs that gave rise to them. Separated from the state, religious freedom ignites the spark of new movements for social and political freedom, for freedom of philosophical, scientific, religious inquiry. And the Enlightenment follows very closely on the heels of the Reformation. It's a direct line. And the profound effect of this liberation can be hard to imagine today because we take all these things for granted. It was and still is a paradigm shift that transformed European civilization, one whose effects are still playing out. In 1936, philosophy professor and disciples of Christ minister Edward Ames wrote in his article, Liberalism in Religion, and I quote, "The term liberalism seems to be developing a religious usage which gives it growing significance. It is more sharply contrasted with fundamentalism and signifies a far deeper meaning than modernism. Fundamentalism describes a relatively uncritical attitude. In it, custom, traditionalism and authoritarianism are dominant. And there is no doubt that the loss of the traditional faith has left many people confused and rudderless. And they are finding that there is no adequate satisfaction in mere excitement or in flight from their finer ideals. They crave a sense of deeper meaning and direction for their lives. Religious liberalism, not as a cult, but as an attitude and method, turns to the living realities and the actual tasks of building a more significant individual and collective life. And I love those two words, attitude and method. Attitude. But we have an attitude and methods for how we express our moral values. They're expressed in our 7 principles, our commitment to the worth and dignity of every person, our commitment to the democratic process, and our insistence that whatever we do, we seek truth grounded in living reality, not creed or ideology or some authority. We understand that, in the words of Unitarian theologian James Luther Adams, that revelation and truth are not closed, but are constantly being revealed as our knowledge and our understanding grow. You know, even if we have trouble defining exactly what a religion is, we have a pretty good idea of what religion provides to us. Religion gives us a sense of identity, of community, and of belonging. It provides a moral and ethical framework for our lives, and it gives us purpose in the world. It also provides, or should provide, a sense of transcendence, of seeking something beyond the mundane world. Humans as well, that something larger is present in the mundane world with us. Now, being together can provide many of those things. But what distinguishes us from the knitting club and the political party are a couple of things. First, the moral obligation to do good in the world, to make it manifest. And second, that transcendence and immanence lead us to a sacred sense of universality. The feeling that something bigger than we are holds all of us in its embrace, no matter who we are, or where we come from, or what we think. And you can call that whatever you want, but many of us call that love. What makes us a religious community is that moral obligation, and our shared goal of making the world more just and loving. And we do that by liberal means. Make no mistake, this is not easy. Freedom comes with responsibilities. Democracy is difficult and time-consuming and frequently boring. Being inclusive demands we keep opening our hearts and widening the circle. Our faith in humanity is tested over and over again. And truth-seeking is a constant and never-ending pursuit that challenges us to question ourselves and each other and to continuously test our ideas against reality. As Kenneth Paton wrote in our opening words, this house offers a platform for the free voice, for declaring, both in times of security and danger, the full and undivided conflict of opinion. And that means we might get our feelings hurt. We might have to change our minds. We might need to overcome our fear and speak what we truly think aloud. Risk approbation. It means we don't hurry to judgment when someone speaks our truth. It means we generously make room for differences of opinion and the possibility that many things can be true at the same time. Community is hard. True community is hard. We got to work at it, and we will fail at it, probably with some regularity. And when we stumble, we're called to be compassionate to ourselves and others, for we are only human. We're here to help each other be better human beings, but we can't do this alone. Who belongs in this house? I think it's anyone who wants to make the better world a better place for all. The more the merrier. Sometimes. Sometimes it might be contentious. Because we will disagree on what a better world looks like and how to get there. But finding the way together is how we get to the world. It's how we get to that world. Our covenants can only ever show us how to travel. They're not signposts that tell us where to go. Because the terrain we traverse is not some fixed road, some 4-lane highway to utopia that we all just follow it. We end up there. The terrain we traverse is the wild country of spirit and love and reality. We travel the pathless path. The path that creates itself under our feet as we walk together. So welcome to the messy, sometimes difficult, sometimes wonderful, rarely boring world of liberal religious community. I, for one, am glad I'm here, that you are here, that we are here together. It's good to be together, and it makes all the difference in the world. Thank you.
Amen, amen. Thank you. Okay, thank you. So it's time for our sharing of responsibility. I think, B, if you would help Emily pass, that would be awesome. And this is a reminder from what tag on what Bob said. Your financial gifts support this community and its ongoing work in accomplishing our vision and mission. And I don't know how many of you actually have noticed these things up here, but we hang them every Sunday. And the mission is really just a beautiful thing, and I'm going to read it to you, but you might look at it when you come in on Sunday. Our mission is to be an illuminating beacon and an active force, promoting liberal religious values and interfaith and intercultural collaboration to better our congregation, our greater towns community, and the world beyond. I'd like to offer them up to the universe. And for these, we give thanks. And now back to Munro for the closing words, extinguishing the chalice, close the
So for some reason this morning, these words of Brene Brown seem appropriate. I'm not quite sure how they relate to community, but something in me tells me that they do. There will be times when standing alone feels too hard, too scary, and we'll doubt our ability to make our way through the uncertainty. And someone, somewhere will say, don't do it. You don't have what it takes to survive the wilderness. And this is when you reach deep into your heart and remind yourself, I am the wilderness. And I think we remind ourselves that we are the wilderness. And now let's join together in the words of extinguishing our chalice. In the order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together. For this